Welcome to the Black Belt Business Podcast. My name is Matthew Brenner, and today we have with us a very special guest because this is actually my jujitsu instructor, and he started his own jujitsu school about 2.5, 3 years ago. What year was that?
2021, I think. So 2 years, 2.5 years ago, I
Yeah, good
guess.
timing to start a martial arts school. So
Yeah.
touche to that. He is a medalist in nogi in the Pan. What would you call that? The Pan American tournament or Pan Jiu
Yeah, like
Jitsu
so
something?
IBJJF, no gi pans in Masters 1 brown belt adult, and then this year in a Masters 3 black belt.
Very cool. So he's a badass. Um, Whenever I train with him, obviously he's 1,000 times better than me. I'm a blue belt, and I'd say probably kind of a crappy blue belt. And whenever I train with him, I think sometimes he has his eyes closed. Sometimes I think he's thinking about coffee or some other stuff, and somehow I slowly get strangled. And what is your blog or website that you use for education?
So Josh Vogel art is the main one. Also, you're not a crappy blue belt. You're way better than you give yourself credit for.
I appreciate that.
No problem. But
I
yeah,
love it when guests lie on the
joshvogelart.com.
podcast every
What's
I
that?
said I love it when guests lie about my
I've
skills
been
on
well paid.
podcasts. Uh, so Josh, I know we're gonna talk about today, like, the growth of your business over the past 2 years. You
Okay.
worked under another school for a while,
Mhm.
and then eventually you open up yours, and then we're gonna talk about cats and skateboarding. I know today you rode in your scooter, and
Yep.
we'll also talk about what it's like running a business with your wife,
Okay.
right? Like, how you manage that relationship. But before we do that, you worked under another school for a while, another organization,
Mhm.
and eventually you decided to open up your own. And then I didn't even know your new location was open or it existed, but I moved, and then the class times didn't work for me, my other school anymore. And then I was like, someone told me, "Oh yeah, Josh has a school," and I was like, "What? Like that's awesome!" And I looked, and the times worked great, and then I joined with you, and it was great because I had this familiarity with you already. Like you were one of my first teachers.
Yeah.
I just didn't even know you had like a school of your own. So, what was it like going from, hey, I'm an instructor at one organization to doing your own? Was that like scary? Was that like a tough process? Tell me about it.
Oh, so it was interesting. So I was at the other place for about 18 years, um and then I basically my role there was signing up new students, teaching a lot of the classes, teaching private lessons, and then basic like managerial duties. And so a lot of the like day-to-day experience of running a jiu-jitsu school, I had a ton of experience with. So when it came time to do my own thing, it was really just like now I can do things the way that I feel like they should be done. Everybody has their own ideas about things. And so my experience doing that made it very comfortable for me. Like as far as my part of the business end of things, actually taking the leap and doing your own thing is very scary. So that part of it of like leaving somewhere that I was, 18 years in the place and I was very comfortable as far as my routine goes. And then taking the jump and doing my own thing, that was a scary process. But ultimately, I don't it was a weird thing because everything felt right. So it wasn't as scary as I would have imagined it to be. It was financially scary because Angie will tell you I'm notoriously cheap. So when it comes
This
to
is your
like
wife,
yeah,
Angie.
yeah, my
Yeah.
wife. So the cost of opening a new school, that was stressful and scary for me, but the actual, like, opening a place and teaching classes and doing all the construction work and all that stuff, um, it was stressful and it was new, but for some reason, we just completely believed in ourselves and it worked out great.
So obviously you're in a spot for like 18 years with another
Mhm.
organization, and then eventually decide to do things on your own. Was there like did you have that in the back of your mind, like, eventually you do that? Or is that something that at some point you're like, "Hey, maybe our philosophies don't align anymore. I'm gonna go do my own thing." 'Cause everyone always, like not always, but a lot of people always believe they could do something better than their boss or have different feelings on how to do certain things, right? So what gave you the idea of like, "Hey, I'm gonna start my own, branch?"
Um, so basically, like financially, I was in a situation where I was teaching a ton of private lessons because, we own a house, we have a mortgage to pay, we have bills. And the way that I teach private lessons is very hard on my body because I spend most of the private lesson like rolling with my students and making sure that they feel hands-on the things that I'm trying to express to them. So if I'm teaching like half guard or some sort of other technique, um, I would spend a lot of time doing positional sparring and rolling with my students. And, I was doing a ton of private lessons per week. And, I'm 44 now and, I was, entering my 40s back then, and it beats your body up. And a lot of my students were much, much bigger than me, which is difficult too, because, at the time I was about 155, 160 pounds in my early 40s, rolling with, anywhere between 7 to 10 people that are 240, 250, 260 pounds each week on top of my own jujitsu training, on top of teaching group classes. And that schedule became pretty untenable for me. So I had to make it, Angie and I had to make a change. She was doing the same thing. And we had to make a change where, you know, we could financially, we could make more money and make a comfortable living without, destroying our bodies. And then also, there are certain, everybody has their own ideas about how a jujitsu school should be run and professionalism and, curriculums and, the way to interact with students and the way that culture should be. And our views of those things weren't the same as the place that we were at. So that also made it seem like a good idea to open our own place. So, ideally, originally I wanted to open a place with the owner of the gym or take over the place that we were at before, but um, that didn't work out.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then where did you get the money to start this up? Like, obviously, you're beating yourself up in private lessons. I'm sure you have income coming in, but you also have lots of expenses, right?
Yeah.
So, like, A, how much did you need to open up a school? And B, how did you get the money for it? How did you get the funding?
So basically, we took our life savings. Like I mentioned before, I'm fairly cheap and I don't spend money willingly. So I, save a lot of the money that I was making um and then Angie too, she saved we basically saved a lot of money for not a lot of money, but we saved a fair amount of money and then we took out a loan on top of that. And then we used that money to open the gym and that was I mean, the mats alone were I think 20 or $25,000. And then, our location in Old City that's one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Philadelphia. So, um, you know, opening at that location was expensive and, it cost a lot of money, but it was mostly our life savings plus a loan that we took out.
Damn, nothing that will light a fire under your ass, like throwing your entire life savings into a business or project.
100%, yeah.
So, how much did you actually put in from like your savings, and how much did you get from a loan?
I think the savings we put in, Angie does most of the financial stuff, but I think it was like 15 or 20 grand. And then from the loan, I think it was another like 30 or something like that,
Okay.
20 or 30.
Are
So
you still paying back the loan?
yeah, we're still paying back the loan. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not bad. We got a good deal. So, but yeah, it was basically like, we just put everything into it. And maybe that's part of what I was talking about earlier about just like 100% believing that it would work out because when we made that commitment to do it, there's really no choice. Like if, we put everything that we have into it and took out a loan and we're on the hook for a lease, so there's really no choice but to do it. So you
Mm.
can't really have any doubt because like if I had to, before I started doing jiu-jitsu professionally, I was working at a moving company carrying furniture. So and Angie was working in the restaurant industry. So the way that we looked at it was, if the business like we did all this, we made the commitment, and if the business doesn't work out the way that we need it to, then I'll carry furniture. She'll go work in a restaurant. We'll teach classes at night. We'll do 1,000 private lessons a week, but no matter what it takes, we'll make it work.
Mm.
And so I think that's where the confidence came from, and that's why, when you asked earlier if like what it was like making that transition, it was scary, but more like it was a mixed feeling of scariness, but also we 100% believed in ourselves because we know that no matter what, we have the work ethic to make it work no matter what.
Mm. And then when you got the loan and then obviously, like, probably drained your bank accounts for the most part,
Yeah.
use your savings, and you opened up. Was it successful right away? Like, what happened with the launch?
So basically, we started off with around like 30 students, I think. And then,
How did you start off with 30? How did that happen?
so basically, when we opened up, there were a lot of people that we had been teaching for years and years and years, and, who decided to come with us when we opened our school. And then there were people that, I had known from, years prior who had maybe come to the school where I was teaching before, or I just knew from online because I used to be uh, I used to post on a lot of like jujitsu forums and stuff like that. And I was pretty vocal online with my old blog and stuff like that. So, there were people who put in a good word and sent us students, and
Cool.
so partially people came with us when we opened our school, and then partially just people were kind enough to send students our way.
Cool. It's just like a reputation and people just knowing you.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
And then when people started to show up, like obviously you had the lease, and then you had sorry, yeah, like obviously that's probably the biggest expense, and the mats. People don't realize how expensive freaking mats are.
good mats. Yeah,
Yeah, like what's the brand your mats
we
use?
got zebra mats.
Zebra mats. Yeah. So
Those are
and
my babies.
yeah, your mats are really, really nice. I
Thanks.
also found out for anyone that's listening who's a martial arts school owner that yours is like textured,
Hmm.
right? And I think Angie was telling me when it's textured, that makes it easier to grip when it's sweaty, so you're not slipping easily, and it's not necessarily difficult to clean.
No, so the great thing about these mats, like it to me, the mats were such a big deal. Like, there were a lot of things that I just didn't care about, and I was like, Angie wanted to do certain things, and I trust her judgment with like the layout of the school, the way things look, all that. But the one thing that I had that was 100% a must was getting good mats, and I chose the zebra mats because when I would compete in IBJJF tournaments, which is International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation, and then also Grapplers Quest tournaments, which was a pretty big local organization, they use zebra mats, and those are the only mats that I ever rolled on that were not slippery and also didn't rip the skin off your body.
Mm,
So what you were saying about texture is that they are textured, but they're not textured in the way that like there are some styles of mats that are sort of ridged, like a rice grain kind of feel. And those are grippy, but you tend to get mat burn with those, which
mm,
means that like the skin of your knuckles on your hands and feet gets ripped off very easily, and you'll end up with like a lot of scabs on your elbows and knees. But if you go with a completely smooth texture, they're very slippery. And the problem with slippery mats is that when you're training on slippery mats, you sweat. And when you sweat on slippery mats, not only do you have no friction with your partner, you slip all over the place on your training partner, but then the surface that you're on is slippery, which means that you're doing jujitsu on ice,
yeah,
which is super dangerous and also changes the way that you train.
mm,
So, for example, if you're on grippy mats and you want to do takedowns and you're sweaty, you can still do takedowns from the feet to the floor and not worry about slipping and tearing your knee or slipping and landing on somebody else or slipping and whacking your head on somebody's leg as you're trying to take them down. Um, so on these mats, you can still do takedowns for an entire training session. You can still do standing guard passing. You can do pretty much your entire jiu-jitsu game without having to modify it from the beginning of a training session to the end of a training session. Whereas on slippery mats, you can only play your entire jiu-jitsu game for the first maybe 15, 20 minutes, and then you have to start modifying what you do because it's too slippery to do your normal game.
mm. It's funny you say training on ice because when I was preparing for this interview today or this podcast episode, I was talking to a fellow student who trains there with me, one of my friends, and we are talking about like what things should I bring up, and like one of the things that I wanted to bring up, and you kind of just hit on it, is like as an instructor that's delivering concepts that are not that the average person doesn't understand. Like, the average person who walks in doesn't understand martial arts at all, right?
Mhm.
They might understand some things, but, like, maybe they've watched UFC or something, but they don't understand most things, and, like, you're so good at using analogies to help people relate to this martial art that is not necessarily relatable, right?
Yeah.
So, like you mentioned, it's like doing jujitsu on ice, right? And that's like a quick analogy that I can totally understand,
Yeah.
right? So, and you use so many analogies in your class, and sometimes I'll steal them. Sometimes I'll like share with our team, like, "Hey, this is like this," and they'll be like, "Oh, that's such a good idea," right? Like, I used one of the things you were telling us in class the other day was like your hands and feet are like flashlights and like pretending like you're a robber in a house and you're the other person has like the flashlights in their hand and their feet. So you got to get past the flashlights,
Yeah.
right? And like you want to, if you want to get past their defenses, you can't let them shoot that flashlight at you. You can't let them illuminate you.
Right.
And I was like, damn, that's really good. I remember that now. And that was, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago or something. And I'm like, it helps me think about it.
Thanks.
So where do you get these ideas for analogies? They just, like, come to you or
Yeah, a little bit. So, I mean, the basic principle is that are you familiar with mnemonic memory techniques?
a little bit, but tell me what you think.
Basically, like mnemonics are ways to make remembering things easier. I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the actual definition like memorized, but that's
Yeah.
generally what I understand them to be is just techniques that you can use. For example, if you're a doctor and you're trying to remember, you know, the 50 bones that are in the upper torso of a human being or something, and like you're like, okay, the femur, the tibia, fibia, whatever. Like if you can't just memorize those things, then you have to have tricks that'll help those things stick in your brain, right? And it's the same thing with jujitsu, where if jujitsu is pretty complicated. And I think most martial arts are fairly complicated as far as like technique, remembering detail. And so if I were to say to you, okay, well, when you're playing open guard on bottom, make sure that you're using the distal ends of your hands and make sure that the lower surface of your palms is facing your partner's chest and upper torso region. You're never going to remember that, right? Because you have to remember that, but then you got to remember what the feet are doing, the knees are doing, all the other stuff. But if I say something that gets an emotional connection with you, like, something that sounds funny, something that's memorable, something that, for some people, like really it's anything that'll get an emotional connection. And I choose to try to focus on things that are funny because you could get the same result with something that's disturbing. Like imagine that you have like rays that are burning the skin off your partner's face from your palms. Like that's kind of messed up sounding, right? And you'll remember that because it's like a disturbing image, but it's a lot easier and it's a lot easier and more palatable to say something that's like funny and memorable or something that people will remember, but not be like, oh God, why did he have to say that? I don't want to think about that, you know?
Yeah, you had one the other day that reminds me of that.
Yeah.
Do you have analogies you use over and over again, or it's like however you think about it on the spot?
Yeah, I have some that I use over and over again because they're like basically when I'm teaching, if I'm using analogies or like whatever language that I'm using while I'm teaching, I'm always trying to find the best way to get the best result on the training floor from the students. So when I use an analogy, if like let's say I have a class full of 15 people and maybe 12 of the people are struggling to get the thing that I'm saying, if I can find a simple, to the point analogy that makes at least 10 of those people understand what I'm saying better, then I'll keep that one
Mm.
and I'll use it over and over and over again. And then if it's something that, there's been a bunch of them that are just duds where I'm like, in my head it makes sense. Like for example, I was teaching a class 2 or 3 months ago where I asked the class. I was doing a round called the Ripley round. Like you ever see Talented Mr. Ripley, the movie?
Yeah.
Well, nobody in the class had seen that movie,
Mm.
so I was trying to use that movie as an analogy, but nobody knew what I was talking
It's
about.
so specific.
And then when I tried to explain it, it was like disturbing because like the round was I was having people positional sparring, but you like you have to pretend to do my game against me.
Yeah.
So, for example, I like cut pass, underhook half guard. I like single leg takedown. So those are like my game in jiu-jitsu. And so in the movie The Talented Mr. Ripley, Matt Damon pretends to be Jude Law. So the idea would be that you pretend to be me on the training floor and do my game against me. But when nobody knew what I was talking about, like I had to explain. I was like, "Well, Matt Damon, he kind of falls in love with Jude Law, and then he murders him in a boat." And I'm trying to explain this to them, and
And
they're like,
Angie's like, "Shut up, shut up, shut up.
so she
Stop
wasn't there
talking."
that she wasn't
Okay,
there
good.
that day, but it would have been better if she was, because then she could have lightened the mood a little bit.
Yeah.
But instead, I'm like, like babbling on about like murdering somebody in a boat, and I'm like, all right, that one's a dud. I'm
Yeah.
not going to use that one again.
We brought it up here today, so that's good.
Yeah,
Still
yeah.
lives on forever.
Well, just at the very least, maybe some of them will watch the movie and then know what I'm talking about next time.
One of the analogies you used, I remember we're talking about arm bars, and you're like, "All right, pretend their arm is or the shoulder is kinda like a rotisserie chicken drumstick." And
Yeah,
you're grabbing the rotisserie chicken, and you gotta pull, and then you gotta crack, and then you gotta crack off the drumstick to eat it, but you want all the meat to stay on the bones, you gotta crack it at the right spot.
yeah,
And I was like, "Damn, that's really good." I used that one in class for our students. We were doing something. We weren't doing maybe we were doing, like, a basic arm bar because we teach karate, not jujitsu, but we'll go over a couple basic moves and stuff
yeah,
just so they know it. And they were cracking up when I said that, and, like, they definitely remember that, right?
yeah.
So, it's such a good I always feel like there's, like you can teach a class and teach pretty good, but if you use lots of analogies and stories, that's the difference between an okay teacher and, like, an advanced master teacher. It's not necessarily how many trophies or championships or medals they have or how long they've been open or how many students, but how they can transfer information where it's gonna be memorable for a really long time,
That's the goal, yeah.
right?
And then what helps with that too is like, so that like there are some analogies that I've been using for 10, 15 years, and those are like good ones that I know that I can connect with people.
Can you share some of those?
So like one of them would be for armbar from closed guard. I don't teach it this way anymore, but like because the technique changed, but the actual analogy didn't change. It's a foot in the hip potato chip.
Okay.
So if I'm trying to get you to play closed guard and then put your foot in the hip so that you can slide your hips out to the side, it's foot in the hip potato chip.
Okay.
And it rhymes, it's stupid, it's silly. People eat potato chips, so you remember it, right? Um, or geez, it's hard to it's hard to remember off the top of my head,
Yeah, totally.
but like I'll stew on that and I'll come up with other ones that I remember, but um but the idea is then that there's also different layers of analogies that you can use, because really the point is that you're trying to connect the information in your head to your student, right? And so there's some that are like universal. Everybody's had a potato chip. Most people, even if they haven't eaten a rotisserie chicken, maybe they're vegan, vegetarian, they're familiar with the idea of eating a chicken. And if they aren't, I can use like a head of broccoli or some cauliflower for the
Yeah.
same concept.
Yeah.
Um, but then there's some things that you really need to understand your student on an individual level to connect with them. So, for
Mm.
example, when I was teaching private lessons a lot, there were people who were high profile chefs. There were people who, worked part time carrying furniture. There were people who did real estate. There were people who were bus boys or wait staff at restaurants. And so I would have to find ways to connect what I was saying with something that they understand well. Because if I try to talk to, let's say you've never worked in a restaurant before, right? So if I start talking to you about like, dinner service or working the line in a kitchen, you might not know what I'm talking about. Whereas somebody like Angie, who spent 20 years working in restaurants, she instantly knows what I'm talking about.
Mm.
So it's finding analogies that connect with a large group that are kind of universal analogies. And then there's ones that are, you know, maybe like, a meme that everybody's seen on Instagram, or like a cat meme that, the cat screaming at the woman or whatever, like that kind of meme. And then there's more specific ones that are relevant to the individual, where you're just trying to talk to that person and connect with them so that they can understand what you're saying.
Very cool. And I have to admit, I lost the bet because I bet you would bring up cats in less than 20 minutes. It's been more than that.
Has it really?
Can't believe, yeah, I can't believe it's taken longer than that. So,
Wow.
what's with your obsession with cats? Why do you love cats so much?
They're just great. I mean, they're like, probably part of it is I grew up with a couple cats, and they were awesome. So I've got good memories from that. And then I think on a practical level, cats. So every cat that I've ever had in my life has like a just an amazing personality. Like they're assholes, but they're also like really interesting or funny or affectionate or just I always have an emotional connection with the cats that have been in my life, and I like that they're low maintenance too.
How many cats do you have?
Right now we have 3 cats.
3 cats,
Yeah,
okay.
so we got our most recent cat, Hafa. We got him this is a great story. We actually got him last year at JJC, at the Jiu Jitsu Company, on Angie's birthday,
Okay.
because one of our students, Charlie, was riding the L, which is like the one of the subways in Philadelphia, and there was a little tiny kitten on the L, and these kids were messing with it. And so he grabbed the kitten and took it off the L so that the kids didn't mess with it anymore. And he came into the gym and asked us if we had any water that he could feed the cat, because he had bought some cans of cat food, and he was like, he put it in the alley next door, and he didn't know what to do with it. He couldn't bring it home. He's got dogs and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So he was feeding it in the alley, and we went down, and like as soon as we heard that there's a kitten in the alley, like we already knew what was going to happen. Like this is gonna live at our house,
Oh,
So like
and
Angie,
Angie's on board with that too. You guys are
yeah,
both on the same page when it comes to cat love.
100%, yeah,
Okay.
like, as soon as we both looked at each other, and then we knew where this is going, so,
Okay.
we go downstairs, we meet the cat, it's the kitten was, like, literally probably the size of, like, my palm plus 1 knuckle, like, maybe, like this big, like a brick of coffee, like that
Right.
size, and we saw him, and we were just, like, instantly like, "Alright, we love this cat, he's gonna come live with us forever, like, I don't care what the other cats have to say about it, just done." Yeah.
That's so funny. So, 3 cats in, like, an apartment or a house?
House.
House, okay,
Yeah,
so you have
two-bedroom
plenty of
house.
space for that.
Yeah.
But that's not like you don't have a cat nickname. Your nickname is like the Sloth, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Sloth Report is your website
Yeah,
or
that's the
blog.
yeah.
Do you still use that or no?
I still use the web well, so I don't I mean, I'm kinda moving out of the nickname, um, p for a couple of reasons, like, it's not like I'm actively, like, dissuading people from saying the nickname, but I don't really think about it anymore because, it's really interesting, but I'm trying to become a fast grappler, and this might sound, like, stupid or corny or whatever, but I feel like, I always thought of myself as, like, the sloth, like, slow grappler, pressure, kind of ooze over my training partners, and I feel like that sort of became a self-limiting belief for me,
Yeah.
and so now I'm trying to become fast and explosive, which is great at 44 years old, right? Like,
Yeah,
that's what
yeah, good
what I
time to
should
do
be
that.
doing,
Yeah.
um, but I'm trying to, like, develop that style of grappling better, and what I find is that when I think about myself as, like, like sloth or like, "Oh, I'm a slow grappler, that's my style," I feel like it kinda holds me back from developing a faster, more explosive style, which is what I want to develop now,
Mm.
and it's so weird because it's like I would never think that something like that would matter, but it kinda does a little bit because it gets in your head, right?
Yeah, it
Like it
becomes a label,
yeah, it's a
right?
label, and then you think of yourself as, like, the sloth, the slow grappler, like, oozing over your training partners instead of, like, fast and sharp and athletic and explosive, you know?
Yeah, and I just my birthday was yesterday, and people I turned 32, which is still very young,
Mhm.
but I have friends, obviously, that are around the same age as me, and they're always like, the one thing I hear now all the time is that, like, how they feel old, and, like, they tell themselves that over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And, like, even talking with, like, close friends or, like, loved ones, if they say that to me, I say, "Stop.
Yeah.
Don't say that. I don't wanna hear it." Like, I don't wanna be around someone that's like, "Oh, well, 32 now or 34 now, and now I gotta deal with blah, blah, blah." I'm like, "Why are you saying that?" Like, you're making that come true,
Yeah.
right? Like, if there's plenty of I feel personally like my label, at least in my mind, is that, like, I'm gonna always be fit, and I'm always gonna eat well, and I'm always gonna sleep well, like, I might not always have, like, shredded abs or something, right? But that'll always be a big part of my life, and that's, like, kinda like the label and identity I presented to myself. So when people say, um that they feel old and they make jokes about it. I mean,
Mhm.
don't joke about that,
Yeah.
right? Like, you don't wanna be called sloth anymore. Maybe you're not gonna dissuade people, but, like, you'd probably rather not go by that because eventually it's gonna seep in whether you like it or not and become kinda true to you,
Yeah,
right?
and, like, I mean, like, I don't mind if other people like, I just don't think of myself like that anymore,
Yeah.
and it's the same thing what you just said about age, I don't you know, with the sloth thing, like, I don't really care, you know, if like, it's nice, people, you know, give me, like, a sloth doll or something like that, and I like stuff like that. You know, it's well-intentioned, people are cool, it's very nice that they do that, and I like that, but I don't connect that to my personality or my grappling anymore,
Mm.
and so, like, I don't think of myself in that way anymore. And it's funny that you bring up the age thing because, like, you know, for example, what I was just mentioning to you about like trying to be more explosive and faster and more athletic as a grappler, um, I feel like that's something. And then, you know, I started competing again last year after like maybe a 10-year break. Um, and there is a lot of that self-limiting belief about age in jiu-jitsu. Like, you know, I'm 44 years old and people think like, oh, the masters division, that's the old man's division. And I hear people talking about that for like, you know, the people that are doing Masters 1, which is age 30 to 35 years old. They're like, "Oh, Masters 1, that's the old
Would
man."
I be in the Masters division?
You'd be Masters 1, yeah.
Damn,
You're
okay.
32, you said, right?
Yeah.
Yep, so you'd be in Masters 1.
Oh, master.
It sounds
Alright.
cool, right?
Master average blue belt.
I think they used
Yeah.
to call it senior,
Okay.
which is
That's okay.
different, right?
Relax. Call
Yeah,
him a senior.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's, you know, but but you're right though, it is a self-limiting belief, and, like, what's funny is when I actually think about it, like, I'm 44. I train jujitsu 2, sometimes 3 times a day, 5, sometimes 6 days a week. I sprint twice a week. I go skateboarding multiple times per
You
week.
sprint, like, outside on the sidewalk?
Yeah,
Besides jujitsu?
beside twice a week besides jujitsu.
Why?
Well, 2 reasons. 1, because I'm trying to, um, become more explosive and faster
Okay.
on the mats, and I feel like sprinting has been super helpful for not only increasing my speed, but also giving me a better gas tank for explosive movement.
Yeah.
Um, and then also for self-defense,
Okay,
like,
cool.
because most of the situations in a self-defense context that I'm likely to find myself in are solved either by being nice and talking my way out of stuff or just running really fast.
Right.
So,
I actually have a crazy this is not self-defense for me personally, but, a kind of a crazy story I wanna share, in terms of, like, being aware of situations, and then I didn't have to talk my way out of it, but I kinda had to sprint my way out of it.
mhm.
But before we do that, I think sprinting is so wonderful, and I always liked sprinting more than running.
Yeah, same.
And, like, whenever running takes too long. It's like it's just, like, the whole thing takes forever, like,
Yeah,
you gotta stretch first, and you gotta run, you might run for 30 minutes to an hour, and then you gotta do cool down, it's like the whole thing ends up taking, like, an hour and a half.
yeah,
Um, and it's kinda boring, and I always, like, look at 2 different pictures. Look at a picture of a sprinter.
mhm,
Sprinters are freaking jacked,
yeah,
tons of muscle, definition, they look awesome. Then look at someone who does, like, is a marathon runner, and they, like, just, like, super thin and just, like nothing wrong with that, like, you're a runner, okay, great, but, like, if I had to choose between the 2 bodies, I'm
right.
taking sprinter. Like, look at Usain Bolt versus, I don't know, someone who does long distance running. It's 2 very different bodies.
I got yeah,
Um, so I was at here's a story I wanna share.
yeah. Okay.
I've told very few people this. I was at Walmart,
Okay.
okay? Great place to be,
I love
right?
Walmart.
Yeah. Well, if you're super cheap, then you obviously love Walmart.
I just like the
People
people watching.
you got a Walmart Plus membership?
No, I just
No?
you know, it's funny, Angie hates it, but, I like going to Walmart every once in a while just for the wildness of it.
Okay, so you're gonna like this.
Okay.
So I went in there to buy something small. So I walk in, walk out pretty fast. And I walk out in the parking lot and there's a car like facing the Target in like a weird way, like not a natural way for the car to be facing.
Mhm.
And there's a guy standing in front of the car. There's maybe about 15 to 20 feet in between the person in the car and this guy standing there. And this girl is just like screaming in the car. And there's a guy standing, and I'm, like, looking at them, and she's screaming, and in, like, a split second before, like, I even, like, figure out, like, what's going on, I just walked out the store, she slams her foot on the gas directly towards this guy, and she's speeding, and I'm like, "Oh my god," and there wasn't that much room, maybe 20 feet.
Yeah.
I'm like, "I'm about to watch this guy get run over." buy
Wow.
a car. Like, I'm about to watch a freaking murder
Yeah.
outside the Walmart, which is probably the most likely place you'd see a murder, now I think
Walmart
about
or
it.
Wawa.
Or
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Wawa's like a convenience store in Philadelphia. They can get rowdy. They've been closing them because people don't act well at nighttime there. So anyway, so this girl speeds and I'm just like terrified. And then she slams the brake maybe 6 inches before him.
Yeah.
And this dude does not flinch. He doesn't blink. He doesn't shift his weight to his heels. He
Yeah.
doesn't step back. He stands there like a brick wall. I could not believe it. Like, he did not move. Like, this guy is a freaking G. Like, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
he's out of his mind. Like, if he were to take 3 steps back, he would have been behind those metal poles that they have at like supermarkets or
Right,
Targets
right,
or
right.
whatever,
Yeah.
so people don't slam into the building. No, he just literally just stood there
Wow.
and they're screaming, and the guy doesn't say a word, but the lady in the car is yelling and then cursing, and then some other lady walks out with like her little kids. She got 2 little girls with her, and she's like, "Hey, can you stop that? Like, I have little kids with me." And the girl goes like, "F you, mother effer, da 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 da." And just like total trash behavior. And I'm like sitting there watching it, and I'm like, "What the hell am I doing standing here?"
Yeah.
Like, and then the guy, the girl in the car had a guy get out of the car, and, like, looked like there's gonna be a fight maybe, and I'm like, "What am I doing standing here? Like, what is the benefit? Like, entertainment? Like, if there's a shooting, I can get shot, like,
Yeah.
just being in this area." So I sprinted to my car and drove off, and people asked me like, I've told maybe 2 people this, and like, "Well, what happened?" I'm like, "I don't know what happened, but, like, I don't wanna be on the news later."
Yeah.
So, you gotta get out of there, and I always feel like the most important part of self-defense is just awareness. Right, like knowing what's going on around you, not
Yeah.
staring at your phone all the time when you're out in public, knowing who's on your side of the sidewalk, knowing who's on the other side of the sidewalk, where a car's coming from. Like people get just so often now just get hit by cars because they're texting, right? And I'm guilty of that too. Like it's something I would never look at my phone, but
Yeah, I mean, we all do the same thing, and I mean, yeah, like it's. I think with the self-defense thing, it really is just like, what are the situations that you're most likely to come across, and then what are the things that you need to be good at to survive those situations. And for a lot of people, it's just like if you're walking around Center City, you're probably going to have to worry about getting hit by a car, or you know, sometimes there's like flash mob stuff that happens,
yeah.
or people randomly shooting at each other, which sounds crazy to say it, but like Philly's kind of dangerous like that right now. um
I hope my mom doesn't listen to this episode. She'll freak out.
I'm making all of this up. um
Hunter Brenner, everything's safe and fine and normal. Don't worry.
the worst you're gonna have to deal with is brain freeze from ice cream, and that's
It's
it.
terrible.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's sometimes like your best self-defense is just like, you know staying off your phone, and then being able to like just turn your ego down and say, you know what, I'm not going to yell at that person that almost hit me with their car, because I don't know if they're going to put it in reverse and try to hit me again or shoot me or whatever.
Mm.
Yeah.
So going back to your school, so and so you have some context for my school when I first opened, I took out an $80,000 loan.
Okay.
So a little bit more than what you took out.
Yeah.
Um, but I was able to borrow it from family, which was very fortunate. It took me like 4 years to pay it back, something like that. And I paid it all back, and it was all good. But it was scary as hell because now it's like I don't want to let my family down,
Yeah.
right? So how long did it take you to, I guess, like have your expenses at least cover, or the money coming in cover your expenses? Like, how long did it take for you to get even at least?
Um, I mean, I think about 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, I mean,
How much is rent in Old City?
in Old City, so our location
You're
is,
like on the second floor too. You're not like a walk in. You got to go upstairs.
yeah, you gotta go upstairs. So it was like, between 5 and 7,000.
Between 5 and
Yeah, because
7,000.
our lease, like, it goes up a little bit each year. So,
Yeah.
and then there's like condo, because we're part of a condo.
Oh, I see.
There's condo fees and stuff. So
Okay.
yeah.
And then, are you personally liable on the lease? Like, are you if
Pretty so Angie is in charge of that stuff,
yeah,
and she told me, but
don't remember.
yeah, that's a nice way of
That's
putting it. I try really hard with stuff like that to remember, but it's just I trust her, and so when she tells me stuff like that, like I'm just like, okay, this is something that I trust her. I know she's on top of this. so I don't have to have this in my memory bank.
Knock it out.
Yeah,
Well, I'll tell you a tip about that, just so if you ever do this again or you move different buildings or whatever,
yeah,
and at least Angie can hear this and anyone else that runs a martial arts school. So we prefer to buy a building when we can, but we don't always do it just because sometimes it's not possible, like where it's at in the city or it's way too expensive or whatever.
yeah.
Um, but we recently had a lease negotiation for our location in Philadelphia in like a downtown area, North of the Liberties,
Mhm.
and they wanted us to personally guarantee the loan, which is really common. Which is basically like, hey, if your jujitsu school or martial arts school goes to crap, you owe us everything you got to pay off the whatever's left on your lease,
Yeah,
right?
so you
So if you
can't
have
do
your
like an
house.
LLC and then say, "Ah, you know what? That's not me. I'm out."
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. 'Cause then they're on the hook, so I understand how it is for the landlord too,
right,
so they want you to personally guarantee it, and I don't wanna personally guarantee anything, like, I don't want them taking all my assets if, like, especially if I'm opening a 2nd or 3rd or 4th location where I'm not gonna be a part of it daily,
right.
like, I know it'll be successful, but, like, God forbid something happens, I don't want to lose my house,
Yeah.
right? Or be on the hook for 3 years of a lease. So, one of the things we'll do, and we did for this last time, if you can, is we just gave them extra security deposit.
Oh,
So
okay.
we gave them, like, instead of 1 month security deposit, I think we gave them 6 months of security deposit.
Mhm.
And then over the course of the lease, I think it was like a 5-year lease, we get back a security deposit each year. So, like, each year 1 is like we get 1 back, year 2, we get 2 back, year 3, so it's kinda like we get that money back,
Yeah.
and but we don't have to personally guarantee anything, and that made them comfortable. So, if you ever get in that situation again, that could be a route you can take, and that was an idea from that I got from my brother I would never thought of, and I'm like, "Oh, let's bring it up with them," and they're like, "Yeah, we can do that, that sounds
That's really
great."
smart, yeah.
Yeah. So now that one of the things we talked about before we hopped on here is you just hit your first 30K month in
Mhm.
revenue. So
Thank you.
congratulations to that. It's a really big deal. That's like a big marker for martial arts schools. Usually it's like first like the 10K mark, and then it's like the 30K mark, and then it's the 50K mark. And then after that, you really want to get to like 80K or above. Which most martial arts schools as an a school they're not going to get to. And by the way, I'm talking not talking about profit. I'm talking about gross revenue,
Okay.
right? And most good martial arts schools will run at about a 30, anywhere between 20 to 40% margins. So like what is their actual profit they get from that monthly expense? So just some like I know that sometimes when I bring up like general numbers, like what to look for, that could be helpful for you.
Okay.
So you can compare, but oh, cool, like we're at here, we're at there. And anyone who's listening, that's generally what we look for out of our schools is a 20 to 40% margin. And a third of our expenses, about a third, is usually like 28 to 30% will be on payroll,
Okay.
and the another 20 to 30% will be on the building and uniforms and all mats and all the other electricity bill, all the rest of it.
Right.
But we want to keep generally between 20 and 40% of profit. Some schools obviously are way more or higher profit margins if they're maybe in a place where the expenses aren't as high, and some others will be lower, right?
Thanks for sharing
But
all that, by the way. It's
yeah.
interesting because I know you've been doing this for a long time, so I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, I love sharing it. I think so. We call it a general business term for it is a KPI, a key performance indicator,
Okay.
and that means like it's a general number that you wanna like. Uh, that's like a guideline of like where you want to get to. So in general, at the best martial arts schools in the world, will do their attrition rate. So how many people quit per month is like 5% or lower. Okay. So the retention rate, how many people they keep, is about 95%.
Okay.
Most people at around like the 8 to 10% range is like about the average. And then like a regular gym, if you're like a big box gym, like a Planet Fitness or something, then your attrition is like 25% or higher. So it's much higher. But they're also their membership costs are so low, they can sign up 75 or 100 people in a month and not be a big deal.
Yeah.
For us, like you, we run more boutique style, so it's higher tuition, right? And lower fewer people in the school, and just more more personal attention.
Yeah, like, I like the, like I think La Colombe is a nice example of this. Like, I like
The coffee shop for anyone who's listening.
yeah, so La Colombe's a local Philadelphia coffee shop that, you know, most coffee shops are like mom and pop, right? And then there's Starbucks on the other end of things. And I like that sort of in between where it's like a mom and pop kind of feel, but there are professional standards set in place and
Mm,
they run like a business and it's not like, like it's not too mom and like I think one of the things that jiu-jitsu schools suffer from is being too on the like too informal, like, and I don't want to say unprofessional because that sounds harsh, but too on the mom and pop end and not without it not having good professional and business standards
mhm.
that make sure that the business is successful and make sure that all the students are happy. So I think like that's I like that you're saying that about your business that you do keep a mom and pop feel, but I also know, just from knowing you and having some experience, like seeing your business, and some of your businesses, that you do things in a professional way, but maintain a mom and pop feel, I guess is what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, exactly. We wanna maintain a family feel the best way we can,
Yeah,
but we don't wanna run it that way. Like, it's gotta be clean when you walk in. Most jujitsu schools are disgusting,
that's what I mean. Yeah.
right? Like, um, you know, most jujitsu schools don't really don't track any sort of attendance. Some people are paying, some people aren't. People pay different tuition rates. Like everyone in our school, unless they joined like 8 years ago and tuition was different or something,
Hmm.
that's different because tuition will go up over time.
Yeah.
But besides that, like everyone pays the same tuition. I don't want one person talking to someone else and say, "Oh wait, you pay what? Oh, you pay this? Oh, you didn't negotiate?"
Right.
Like no, we don't negotiate at all.
Yeah, because then
Zero.
they feel like, it's unfair to them,
Yeah.
right? Because, well, why did Ed get, why is he only paying 90 bucks a month and I got to pay 150 a month? And, like that's not fair. Like I come here 5 times a week, I help clean the mat, like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And like, that's one thing that I kind of was hinting at a little bit with professionalism in jiu-jitsu is that, there's lots of like this person pays, this person doesn't pay, this person pays full price, these guys get to train for free. And, the cleaning standards and then with jujitsu, drop-ins are a thing, which is like when people, they come from out of town or sometimes within the local jujitsu community, they come and, just drop in for a class or drop in for an open mat. And there's a lot of schools that don't charge drop-ins, but we do charge drop-ins. And it's like it's wild how much resistance we've gotten from that. But the reason we charge drop-ins is because it would be unfair to our students who actually train with us and pay normal price to let people just hop in whenever they want and train for free.
Mm,
Because how would you feel if you were paying, X amount of dollars per month and let's say there's limited training space on the training floor and there's like 30 people on the mat that aren't paying and you don't even have any room to train because they're rolling around all over the place taking up the space that you're paying for,
mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So that's a big reason that we are pretty strict about enforcing like the drop-in policy.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, you go drop in. I always look at like other industries that are similar that do
Hmm.
way better than us,
Yeah.
right? So I look at like Orange Theory Fitness or Barry's Boot Camp, right?
Yeah.
Other like just big fitness brands that are sort of boutiquey. Like I'm not really gonna look at Planet Fitness as much 'cause they're like big box gym sort of situation. And they just hope no one shows up. We obviously command a higher tuition rate and we want people to show up. Like if they don't show up, like for one of the things we do is like a best practice is like every week we'll look at the attendance and then anyone that wasn't there twice a week we'll call them or text them and say, "Hey, we noticed you weren't here. Is everything okay?" Some of it's automated, but
Yeah.
like some of it is like if the people haven't been there longer, we still do it. They get an automated email, but we know people don't half the time don't never look at that, maybe more
Right.
than half. So we'll also text them and call them. And we'll just say, "Hey, we didn't see you last week. Just checking in to make sure everything's okay." And as much as automation is great, having that personal touch is way more impactful. You gotta yesterday was my birthday. I probably got, 50 happy birthday emails from like the bank and
Yeah.
like, I don't know, Chipotle, but none of that means anything. But if I get a text from a
You get the free
friend,
guacamole, right?
yeah, I think get the free walk. How'd you know that? You're on that birthday email.
Yeah, my birthday was last month, so
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. Um, so whenever we are working on, like, customer service, like, we always think, like, "Okay, what can we do that's like what would Barry's Boot Camp do? What would Orange Theory Fitness do?"
Right.
Right? When you walk in there, they're clean. You have someone at the first front desk that's smiling and is, like, professional.
Yeah.
It's not like you walk into a martial arts school sometimes and it's like no one greets you, right? And you have to, like, find the instructor, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, this person's not here today, come back another day." And you're like, okay,
Yeah.
right?
Nobody there to sign somebody up. There's nobody there to show them the school. You know, sometimes the instructor doesn't even show up or they show up half an hour late or
Yeah,
something.
oh my
Yeah.
god, that I wanna kill someone when that happens.
Yeah.
It's like, "Dude, like, I have stuff to do. Don't show up late. Like, what is it?" And don't apologize. Oh my god. One of the things I love about your school, and it's been, like, so comfortable and fun for me, and it's just, like, a breath of fresh air for me, is that you have this class that you do that I've been, like, desperately needing and wanting, but I didn't necessarily know what it should look like. I just knew I needed help, and that's the drills and skills class you
Hmm.
guys do on Wednesdays. It's by far my favorite class.
Thanks.
So can you tell us a little bit about, like, what that is and, like, your philosophy behind that?
Yeah. So basically, drills and skills is the idea is that it's project based jujitsu, meaning that like when you so typically the old school way of learning jujitsu is you go to class, you learn three random moves, and then you do what's called open mat, which is like it's like recess when you're in high school, but just for jujitsu, and there's no hacky sacks or cigarettes, right? So like you do your moves, and then after class you spar and you try the moves out and see if they work, see if they don't work, and then next class you'll learn three other random moves, and there's no connection and there's no time to really develop any one thing. So what drills and skills is it's a class where you pick a project that you're willing to work on, and then we take you through sort of our recipe of how to train that project and how to study it. And then I spend a lot of time coaching people in the class on their own individual things that they're working on. And then that way you get a chance to actually work on something for a substantial amount of time where you can see progress in it
Mm,
instead of just like, here's an arm bar and then try it. And then if it works, awesome. If it doesn't work, then do something else,
right.
which is basically like, I mean, if you want to get good at anything, if you want to get good at woodworking, you wouldn't like, use a different chisel every single time and try to make a different object every single time. You'd probably start with like, this type of block of wood, and then okay, now you're going to try to make a spoon using these chisels, and then just do that until you can make a spoon, you know?
Yeah, so, like, what I love about the class is that you work on one project. For me, that was sign mount, where I get stuck in a position. I can't get out. I get stuck there all the time.
Right.
And the class helps me develop, like, problem solving skills of how do I actually get out of that sign mount,
Yeah.
and then drilling it over and over and over in different ways. And that way, like, I have a toolbox of, okay, if I get stuck in side mount, I can do this move. It's stuck I can do this other move and work on it, not just like for a class, but like for weeks at a time.
Mhm.
And then at the end, like, when it's either, 8 or 10 weeks, wherever I feel comfortable, like, I feel really comfortable in that position and knowing I can get out of it.
Yeah.
And now the fact I've gone through it for about 10 weeks, like, if someone puts me in that position, I get excited. I'm like, "Ooh, I kinda know the moves," right? And I
Yeah.
know what they're gonna do and how to get out of that. Doesn't mean I always get out of it, but it gives me, like, lots of options,
Yeah.
right? And I love that class. I think if more people thought that way, like you guys call, like, intellectual jujitsu, and, like, you really, like, just thought you just put thought into the movements instead of working just totally on instinct, they'd all get better, and that's what I love about your program.
Thank you. Yeah, and that honestly, like that's kind of the heart and soul of like our the way that we think about jujitsu and what our school, at least like on a technical level, what like I don't like using the word ethos, but that's kind of what it is. Like it's our philosophy of jujitsu is organizing jujitsu information and then doing like project based jujitsu. And like because if you want to get good at something, you have to do that thing for like a certain amount of time, right? Like if in skateboarding when I was a kid, and I still skate, but if I wanted to learn how to do a kickflip, then I can't just try a kickflip and then either it works or it doesn't work. I have to try a kickflip and then, try it in the grass so that I don't fall and crack my head open, and then maybe take it to the sidewalk a little bit, and try it on the sidewalk, but like close to the grass so that if I fall again, I don't crack my head open. And then start to get the hang of like, okay, I got the skateboard halfway over. Okay, cool. That time it went all the way over. And now I can land on it with 1 foot. And then I
Mhm.
can land on it with 2 feet. And now I can do it while rolling. And
Mm.
then that happens over weeks and months and sometimes years. And it's no different with any other skill, no different with jujitsu. And what's cool about your project that you were saying you're doing bottom of side control is that, that's one of the getting stuck there is one of the worst positions in jiu-jitsu, right? Like it's not fun being on bottom of side
I would
control.
argue that. I think north-south is the worst. My face is someone's crotch.
Yeah, but one of the worst, I
Okay, one
mean.
of the worst.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, because that one is like, oh my god, especially if, like, I have, like, a girlfriend watching or there's, like, a
Mhm.
family member and they're like, this
This
is
is
what
what you do.
this
Yeah.
is what you do?" Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, you're so tough, Matt.
Yeah. It's yeah, jiu-jitsu is you lose your shame pretty quickly. That's the first the first thing that goes.
I think, like, so I came from a karate background,
Okay.
right? Where there's, like, obviously some touching, but usually people aren't, like, sweating profusely.
Yeah.
Like, jujitsu is like that you could not sweat more. I don't know what else you do to sweat more,
Yeah.
but maybe if you're sitting in a sauna with a blanket on, you'd be sweating more, but that's about it. And I remember so it's a little bit of a culture shift for me,
Yeah.
right? And also in karate, we're very how do I explain this? We're like very particular about how we teach something. Like we teach
Mhm.
one move, and then you practice it, and you teach one and two, and you practice that, and you teach one, two, and three, and you practice that. We call pyramid teaching,
Yeah.
right? Where you teach and like you teach a certain skill, and then practice it, and then add on to that, and practice one, and you work your way up. And jujitsu, at least my beginning experiences were more like the traditional sense where, like you said earlier, where it's like, hey, you practice this one, bow and arrow choke or something. And it's like, here's some details for it, go practice. Okay, now here's another detail of it. Or if you can't get this move, do this other move. Or then do this other move. But I can't remember all that. At
Yeah.
least I can't remember it sufficiently, like when I'm in the moment sweating, and there's no way I could possibly do that.
Yeah, nobody can remember all that.
Yeah, so this gave me the option to be like, okay, like I can just work on this for a really long time to make it instinct
Mhm.
and natural. What was I gonna say about where was I going with that?
Um, I don't remember, but but where it's going is interesting because, like, what you're touching on is the idea of, like, you don't have to get good at all of jiu-jitsu, you just have to get good at Matt's jiu-jitsu,
Yeah,
right? So, like, your plan from all the major positions, and then you put time into developing those things by making projects out of them. And so, like, for you, you don't have to learn every single thing that I teach in my group classes. Those are potential suggestions for things that you could then make a project out of later. But what you have to do is take the jujitsu that's most relevant to you. Like if you start from the feet and you start a match and you do a single leg, that's Matt's jujitsu right there. You don't have to do 20 different takedowns. You just got to do, 2 or 3 takedowns from the feet. If you're in top of the open guard, couple different guard passes, couple things from side control, couple escapes from side control. And then instead of having 1 million different moves that you have to memorize every detail, you just have, you know, probably 20 moves total.
yeah,
And then even if it's not moves, it's just maybe like 5 positions that have, and then you have an understanding, a well-developed, deep understanding of a few different options from each of those 5 or 6 positions, or 10 positions or whatever it is, you know?
yeah. And that Bruce Lee has a really good quote about that. He's like, I fear not the man who's practiced 10,000 kicks. I fear the man who's practiced one kick 10,000 times.
Yeah.
Right, getting, like, really good reps. I remember there's even sometimes, like, in class with you where we might do, like, 2 or 3 not totally different moves, but, uh, "Oh, if this person does this, you can add on this, or you can
Right.
add on that." Like, you'll come over and be like, "Alright, well, now we're working on this part." I'm like, "Josh, I'm gonna stick with the first part you did, it was great. I just
Yeah.
wanna practice this one more because that's what I know I need."
Yeah.
Right? Like, sometimes when we go, I just know I won't remember it otherwise. But what I was gonna say before, actually, I remembered, was, like, the culture shift
Oh,
thing.
right. Yeah.
Was I remember the first time one of the first times I was training and someone's sweat was dripping and then it dripped into my mouth.
Mm.
And the first time that happened was like, "Oh my god, like,
Yeah.
this is disgusting."
Yeah.
And I'm just now, if, like, it happens, like, it's, like, a little gross, but I'm like, "Don't worry about it," like, it's not as impactful, and now I get, like, hair in between my teeth, it's, like, probably not my hair,
Yeah.
right? That's happened to you, I'm assuming?
Oh, yeah.
All the time, and it's, like, so gross. So how do you get, like, a beginner to get past that? 'Cause that's hard for most people.
So It's interesting because like that's where I think professionalism in like keeping a school clean matters a lot. So for example, I mean, like Angie and I go bonkers trying to keep our school clean. Like I am obsessive about vacuuming, making sure that the hairs that you're talking about aren't like they're as non-existent as humanly possible. It's like cleaning up like a criminal cleaning up a crime scene so that they don't get caught. Like that's how I feel about cleaning the gym. And so the reason I mention that is because if you're in a gym that's not clean and the mats aren't getting cleaned regularly and I've been in places before where you could be wrestling with somebody or rolling with somebody and not only do you get like a bushel of hair on you, but you don't know when that hair is from. Like it could have been from 3 weeks ago, right? Like it's like a tumbleweed of hair,
Yeah.
and it's not your hair because it's like 4 feet long, and it's a tumbleweed, and it's like the Rat King, like when the tails get stuck together,
Yeah.
and it's on you, and it sometimes gets in your face, and then there's like lint from somewhere, or like a piece of dirt, or like some other crazy, disgusting stuff, and that's from not cleaning a gym. So then you got that part of it, right? And so if you get rid of that, if you clean your gym obsessively and that stuff is removed, then you're left with people sweating, right? So people sweating is pretty gross and there's no way around it. We have air conditioning, which helps a lot with that. So like if you're for example, if you don't have AC and you're wrestling with somebody in August and it's like 98 degrees, your experience of somebody dripping gallons of sweat into your face while they're mounted on top of you is going to be very different than if it's August and it's temperature controlled and, yeah, you're sweating, but it's like 72 degrees in the room or 66 degrees or something like that. And it's like manageable, you know? So anyway, like you try to minimize it as much as possible. And then, and then what's left, basically is it still takes time to get used to that feeling of like for a lot of people it's partially the sweaty thing, but for a lot of people it's like the physical touch
Mhm.
that's hard to get used to. And a big part of that comes down to the instructor making everybody feel comfortable through, joking around, um, making sure that they're partnered up with somebody who is going to be safe for them to work with or that's accommodating, making sure the mat culture, like imagine you're doing jujitsu for the first time. You're not used to touching another human being, like in any kind of like fighting sort of way. Like you just the physical contact thing is not there. And you get on the mat with somebody who seems kind of surly and like maybe like too serious. And the instructor's like, "All right, now you're gonna rip their arm, and then when they tap, that means their arm's gonna get shredded if they don't tap." Like it's crazy. And then they're dripping sweat in your face when you're sparring with them for half an hour. And then it's like an awful experience, right? But if you go into a clean environment and everybody's super friendly and your training partner's like, "Yeah, what's up? My name's Todd. How you doing?" Like they make you feel welcome, they make you feel comfortable. Like, "Oh, is this your first time training before?" Like, "Oh man, like I just started training 3 months ago. I know what it's like." You're already disarmed. You already feel at ease. And then when the instructor comes around and they like, joke around with you a little bit, like, "No, your other left hand, put that there," and then you laugh and they laugh. Then the things that are normally unpleasant in jiu-jitsu, like the physical touch and the sweating, doesn't really seem that bad. Or at least you get used to it a lot quicker because, the rest of the experience is much more palatable.
Yeah, I love that, especially if you partner them up, like you said, with someone who you know they're gonna work well with, right?
Yes.
Like, you probably shouldn't have the, 20 no, not even 12, I'll say 41-year-old mom working with, like, the 19-year-old kid who wrestled in high school.
Yeah.
Like, that probably should not be their first partner,
Yeah, but
right?
it's funny because that can be true, but I think that's also a cultural thing. So the cultural part of it is like the safety net that catches those kind of situations that would normally be bad, like 21-year-old ex D1 wrestler who's like, just, wants to win worlds or something like that, rolling with like a, 41-year-old mom or something like, you would think that that would be a problem, but if the culture is right in the school, then it doesn't really matter too much who is paired up with who. There's some people that are wired for to be faster and more aggressive, but if you have a good culture in the school that, you know, encourages that 21-year-old to be very helpful and a good training partner for that person, then it matters a lot less. So that like window for badness gets narrower and narrower and narrower because the culture takes care of a lot of problems. Clean facilities take care of a lot of problems. Having well-trained professional instructors takes care of a lot of problems. And then the chance for a bad experience gets narrower and narrower and narrower. And then what ends up happening is, the worst that you'll experience is like a couple drops of sweat on your forehead
Right.
instead of a tumbleweed of hair that got stuck in your ear. And then your eye is full of somebody else's sweat and they're acting like a jerk to you and they're grinding their elbow across your teeth. And the instructor doesn't care and they're not paying attention. Like that's, you just narrow that window down until it's as small as humanly possible. And then what's left isn't really that bad.
Mm. And I have one other question for you,
Hmm.
and because you work with your wife,
Yeah.
right? How do you get more women in jujitsu?
So I think the number one answer for that, and this is something that Angie is really excellent at, is making sure that there are visible women in leadership roles in the gym. And like, so typically in jiu-jitsu, a lot of the time women are either teaching like a women's only program or teaching only kids classes. And that's not anything negative about kids classes, just typically women in jiu-jitsu schools have very specific roles that they fit into. And then gym owners are reluctant to, for example, have a woman teaching an advanced co-ed class because, like, for example, Angie, when she was teaching, one person told her one time that, um, that they would never, that people would never come to her class if she taught an advanced co-ed class because she's a woman. And that was not the case at all. Like in her classes, some of her classes have been the most successful classes that I've ever seen at a jiu-jitsu school. Sometimes 30, 35, 40 people. People love the class. People will switch their work days so that they come to her
I was
class.
she taught class earlier this week for me
Yeah.
when you weren't. I don't know. I guess you weren't around,
Hmm.
and I was excited.
Yeah,
I was
she's
like, "Ooh,
great.
this is great."
Yeah. And that's what it is. And so I think for women coming in to a jiu-jitsu school or women that are looking at our social media and seeing a jiu-jitsu school, from what Angie has told me and expressed to me, it's very important that they see women that are treated the same as guys. They can teach a co-ed class. They can teach advanced guys jiu-jitsu. The guys respect them the same way that they respect a male instructor.
Mhm.
And there's no like, okay, well, you're a woman, so you got to only teach a women's self-defense class. Like it's,
Yeah.
and what's good about JJC is that I think 60% of our instructors are female. So you got like Angie,
Yeah.
Dina, Ashley, Becca, Sui. And I'm sure there's somebody I'm forgetting, but
I
like,
think the best martial arts schools generally have that.
yeah.
Like our co-founder, like my brother founded Action Karate, but his
Mhm.
co-founder's female, and I would say about half our instructors are female,
Yeah.
right? And like I need a little girl who's like 9 years old to see that. Like they're not gonna look at me the same way they look at her,
Right.
right? But I'll tell you what though, when I went to hire martial arts instructors from the outside,
Hmm.
and I tried to recruit and bring people in, I would say maybe 4 out of 100 that I'd like, look at their resumes or reach out to were women.
Yeah.
And I'm actively searching for women,
Gotcha.
right? And I literally cannot find them. It's so difficult.
Yeah.
Even it's just like there's not I don't know, maybe overall the industry probably needs a lot of work still.
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah, to so they're more comfortable
I
because
can't speak to karate exactly, but I know in jiu-jitsu there's a lot of work that's got to get done.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's in karate, it's the same thing too.
Yeah.
Our co-founder, Jacqueline Razai, she'll talk about how like people have said like little comments about her being a woman, how could she teach, and
Hmm.
like she's like a badass, right? So it's like
Yeah.
honestly just know nothing. And honestly, someone who would say something like that, I'm like, I don't want you in our school. Like that's not good for culture,
That's it. Yeah.
right? You got to cut the weed in that one.
Well, Angio, something that she says a lot is just be normal, right? Which means like, so for example, you come to the daytime classes at JJC and like, there are women in the daytime classes and some of them are smaller, some of them are about the same size as some of the guys. Same thing in the evening classes. And if like I've been in environments before where you treat the women differently when you roll with them, when you spar with them. But it's not the case at JJC because Angie leads in such a way that you don't treat her any differently because she's female. You just be normal. Treat her like a normal person. When I roll with her, I roll with her the same way that I would roll with somebody of her experience level and her strength level as a guy. And when I roll with, like, for example, Maddie or Suyi or Nicole or any of the women that train at JJC, it's the same thing. We all roll with them the same way that we would roll with guys that are the same size and same strength and same experience level. And so just be normal is, you know, like, don't treat women differently. Treat them as well-respected members of the jiu-jitsu school or karate school or whatever, the same way that you would treat a guy, and don't make a fuss about anything. Just be normal.
Yeah.
And I think that it sounds stupid, and not stupid, but it sounds obvious, right? But it's such a simple, obvious thing, and it makes a huge difference in your culture, and nobody at the JGC disrespects Angie or any of the women in the school, in like, because just the leadership is set in such a way where, like, that's just not acceptable.
Yeah.
And I don't think it doesn't even occur to most people because, like, oh yeah, like Angie, she's teaching in class, like, cool. I got to learn how to play deep half guard from her.
Mhm.
Like, it's not like, oh, there's a woman teaching class, I can't learn anything from her, which I've heard in the past from people before, which is nuts.
Yeah, we gotta change this industry. Like,
Yeah.
I think martial arts overall, I think we're probably moving in the right direction. There's definitely some like social media influencers and like jujitsu, karate. I follow kind of like all of them
Yeah.
that are female. That I'm like, oh, this is like kind of like what we need, right? Especially just for like not even necessarily for people our age. Who cares about that? For kids coming up, like they need to see that. We need to have little girls see that,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and it's great because, like, there's so many things about, like, I talk to Angie about this all the time, because we're married and we own a school together. And, we've been working together for about 10 years or something. And there's so many things that, because I'm a guy, I would just have no idea about because my experience is very different than her experience coming up in jiu-jitsu. And so, I think part of it is that it's great that there's so many more women that are vocal about their experiences in jiu-jitsu and martial arts and karate and everything in general. And I think it's important for guys to, like, sit back and listen and hear what they have to say and say, you know what? Like, that's something I never considered. That's messed up, or that's something that I didn't think would be an issue. And I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is just a long-winded way of saying it's good that there are more women that are being vocal so that guys that wouldn't otherwise know that certain things are the way that they are can sit back and listen and learn and then, do their part to just be normal.
Yes, you just don't know what you don't know as a guy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's what you
Like,
said earlier. That's great. Yeah.
yeah, and like for women, we know, and once again, I didn't know this. I learned this from one of our female instructors. Is that women don't like jumping jacks generally because they go up and down, their boobs bounce up and down. And it's like uncomfortable for them,
Oh, okay.
right? So so we stop. We like we did. It's not like we never do jumping jacks in class,
Right.
but it's like we do less of it if it's like more of like a female, if way more females in class, or like we just try to stay like away from that because we
Right.
know it makes women uncomfortable. And like there's plenty of other exercises you can do
Yeah.
that will, get your heart rate pumping that don't require you to be like just uncomfortable, right? If there was
Yeah.
like some other exercise that requires I was knee, like, like all my balls, like I wouldn't want that, right?
Yeah.
So like for we got to stay focused to make sure everyone's really comfortable with martial arts. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being on here. I really appreciate you. You're awesome. I'm excited to keep on training and getting better. And if someone wants to reach out to you, either for classes or I don't know, maybe they run a school in some other part of the country and they're like, hey, I love what you said about this. I love help on that. Or just like, stay in touch. How would they find you?
Well, one thing I finally thought of an example of an analogy that
Yeah, yeah.
doesn't
Run it back.
change.
Run it back.
So when you're doing a rear naked choke, the analogy that has been consistent since as long as I can remember
Yeah.
is, your head is on the right side of the choke if you can pick your own nose.
If you can pick your own nose, your head's
Yeah.
on the
So
right
if this is somebody's neck that I'm trying to choke and my head is on this side, the choke's gonna be ineffective because my head is in the wrong spot and there's too much room for them to escape.
side. Okay.
If my head's on this side, I can use my head to block their head so their head can't move. I can also pick my own nose. So
Ah,
I know
that's
my head's on the
great.
correct side of a rear naked choke if I can pick my own nose. And that's one of those analogies that's eternal.
That's a great one. I can't wait to have a clip of you choking out a coffee cup and picking your nose on my podcast. So if someone wanted to find you, how do they find you?
So you can find at the Jiu Jitsu Company Instagram. So it's at the Jiu Jitsu Company. We have a website, phillyjujitsu.com. Um, and our school is located in Old City, Philadelphia, on 31 South Second Street, second floor. That's Second Street between Market and Chestnut, on top of Insomnia Cookies.
When
And
you
then,
smell the cookies,
yeah,
find your way to the school,
exactly. Just follow your nose and then walk up a pretty long flight of stairs.
and then pick your nose when you get to the top.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, thank you so much for being on here. And if you're a martial arts school owner and you're like, whether you teach jujitsu or karate, taekwondo, judo, anything, and you're like, hey, this sounds awesome. I would love to get help in running my martial arts school systems or culture, training instructors, uh, bring in new members without having to pay for new members, like Facebook ads, Google ads. You want to learn how to do it organically, reach out to me, Matthew at doubleyourdojo.com, or you can find me on Instagram at blackbeltbrenner1. Just say what's up. All right, catch you guys later. Bye.